Like many of you, I hope this summer you have found a time of recreation and restoration in doing things that bring you pleasure and restore your spirits. My wife and daughter are down at Virginia Beach today, for example, so they are enjoying a beach day. Other people like to go to ball games or picnics or spend time with family. And all of these things are restorative to us, and they bring us life and hope and energy. I like to binge watch TV shows. So you're going to have to hear about two of the shows that I have binge watched this week. And they were inspired by something I read and thought about in the gospel. And this is a very challenging gospel. The two shows that I was watching this week, one of them is called The Chosen. It's only available on an app on your phone or other electronic device. It's a story of the gospel. It is a story of Jesus and of these chosen disciples that he is calling. Has anyone seen it besides me? A handful. Good. I love that show. And I love the portrayal of Jesus and of the disciples. I really like Matthew a lot because he's Asperger's, right? So he and I have a lot in common. And I love the sense that Jesus says, get used to different. That's one of the catchphrases of the show is get used to different. Now remember that because I'm going to come back to that. The other show that I have been watching, and it is a rewatch, and a shout out to my son-in-law, if he is watching with Meg, they're at home. Meg had COVID so that she can't come out. She's all better now and doing great. But for Austin, I've been rewatching The Mandalorian. And who's seen The Mandalorian? Anybody seen that? Again, a handful. Clearly, many of you have other things that are much better to do with your time than I do. And God bless you for that. But this one is a story, it's a Star Wars story. And it's a story of a warrior who lives by a code. And the code has this catchphrase associated with it. This is the way. And part of his turmoil is in struggling in making sense of what is actually the way. And funnily enough, the early church was also called the way. So all of this kind of weaves together, at least in my mind. We'll see how it holds in yours. And what does that have to do with today's gospel? Because Jesus has these very uncomfortable words that he says to us in the gospel. Do you think that I have come to bring peace? If I was reading the gospel, particularly of Luke, my answer would be, why, yes, of course. This is exactly what is talked about in the birth narrative when angels are singing glory to God on high and peace on earth to all humanity with whom God is pleased. In the 5th chapter, in the 16th chapter, in the 23rd chapter, in all other chapters of Luke, there's this radical teaching about peace, about reconciliation with one's neighbors, about the way of love. And then here we have Jesus say, no, get used to different. You think you know the answer, you think this is a softball question, and boom, Jesus lays this thing about, I have come to bring division. And then the hardest kind of division, the division of families. What is this all about? I think perhaps it is a consequence of following the way of love. The consequence of being committed to Jesus means that there may be things that cause splits in families, even in the church family. Think back to the Reformation time, right? There was a time when Martin Luther said, shout out to my Lutheran brethren, one of which is my boss, right? So he's a Lutheran Church, Missouri Synod pastor. Martin Luther said, I can't come any further. This way in '04, here's my theses that I am going to tack on the door of the Wittenberg Cathedral. And that was part of his understanding of the way. He could not deal with indulgences and all that went into that. Unfortunately, he had the backing of some German princes who otherwise he would have been burned alive like some of the other heretics of the time. That radical way of following Jesus, and this is in The Mandalorian too, where the Mandalorian is wrestling with what does it mean to follow in the way when their catchphrase is, "This is the way," right, to whatever it is that they're doing. You don't ever take your helmet off because why? This is the way. It's hard to wrestle with. But Jesus, in saying this, in saying that we're going to be committed to the way of love, the way of peace, the way of reconciliation that he is going to be talking about throughout the Gospels, says that even that is going to cause division between people. As people are going to wrestle with what does the way look like, and they're going to come to different conclusions. And those conclusions, reached in faith, may cause them to split, to divide. Perhaps no one knows that better than those of you who have been here for a very long time. One of the things that I also followed very closely over the last 2 weeks is our bishops' gathering at Lambeth in Great Britain. Once every 10 years, it was delayed a couple of years because of COVID. Once every 10 years or so, the bishops of the Anglican Communion, the worldwide Anglican Communion, come together. The danger is always in that gathering that they each, believing very sincerely that they follow the way, are going to excommunicate each other. We see that in the early church too. It took us 300 years to figure out the Nicene Creed, which is fairly standard for us now, but it was extremely controversial at the time. And the Arians, the people who kind of objected to some of these, and some of the other sects, Nestorians, others, they were excommunicated. Anathema was the word used to say with anyone who didn't subscribe to these particular doctrines. What gave me hope in Lambeth was a commitment to a way that embodied peace and reconciliation in a way that they committed to ongoing conversation with each other, to not taking the easy path of demonizing one side or the other and splitting, but in fact holding on to the center and holding on to that, the way of love, which is unending and relentless in its demands. And some people weren't happy about that either. There is no perfect solution this side of heaven, or east of Eden, as we find ourselves. But those moments of hope are very precious, because as I talk with some of my chaplains, the people that I work with, I always ask them, how are you preparing your successor's successor? How are you preparing the way for the people who are going to come and be a part of all the activity of God in what we're doing? And that Lambeth gave me hope. So, dear people of God, when you encounter these hard sayings of Jesus, these things that go, whoa, that's different. One, get used to different. But two, remember that it is embedded in the way of love. And that this is the way.